Welcome to the Stressless Eating Podcast, where we help diet-obsessed and food-crazed women break themselves out of the food and body prison, end the dieting madness, and take control of their health for good. I'm your host, Leanne Ellington, and this podcast is about answering one question. How can you heal your relationship with food and your body and take a practical approach to this whole self-love journey, but without all that restriction, obsession, and shame, and without needing years of therapy just to do so? If you want to know the answer, you're in the right place. All this information is 100% free, so please subscribe to and review our podcast. Okay, we are live. So hello and welcome back to the Stressless Eating Virtual Book Club. I'm super excited to have you all back for, we're going to be going through chapter 2 in Stressless Eating. So if you haven't grabbed your copy yet, feel free to go to stresslesseatingbook.com. There's also a scorecard that you can fill out and see where you just kind of sit right now with the 8 power mindsets that we're going through. And you can go to stresslesseatingscore.com for that. So stresslesseatingbook.com to get the book and follow along, stresslesseatingscore.com to get your scorecard and just kind of walk alongside us through this process. So yesterday we talked about chapter 1, which was the first weight of the weight, which is all of that restriction and deprivation and punishment and persuading yourself to do the things that you don't really want to do, to stay the course, to not eat what you really want to eat what you don't want to eat, and just to really live in that life where you're always fighting, right? Fighting against what you want, having to constantly think about so much mental real estate that's coming up in your life alongside food and your body and dieting and weight loss and all of that stuff, right? And so for those of you that are just really ready to heal this and you are done playing the in, out, on, off, up, down roller coaster game. And let's be honest, it's a game that, it's no fun to play and it's an unwinnable game. Like you are either handcuffed to that roller coaster or you're living in fear that you're going to go off the deep end and, gain a bunch of weight if you're not, right? And so part of it is if you want to live with freedom and permission and choice, you've got to think differently. It's not a strategy problem, or it's not just a strategy problem, I should say. It is a mind problem. It's a brain problem. It's things that have gotten fired and wired in your brain that you cannot out mindset. You can't out willpower, and you've got to really address it and heal it. And so we talked about yesterday how the weight on your body isn't the real weight, right? The real weight that is following you around and bogging you down is what I call the weight of the weight. And there's 4 of them in total. And today, we're going to talk about the weight of all of the shame, the blame, the guilt, the comparisonitis, the perfectionism that typically comes alongside food in your body, and it does not have to, okay? So I call that your inner bitch, all right? So the voices of shame and blame, guilt, comparisonitis, perfectionism, and oftentimes they are not new, right? And oftentimes if they exist in one area of our life, they exist in another area of our life as well, right? Because everywhere we go, there we are. So that being said, first, let's talk about what those actually are, right? Shame and guilt really need to be distinguished because a lot of times they kind of get confused. So going alongside with our cookie example from yesterday, where again, it's never the cookie or the food, it's our thoughts about the food, our thoughts about the cookie that are causing the problem or taking us towards a solution, right? So if I eat a cookie and I think that cookie is bad or wrong, like the act of eating it is bad or wrong, that is guilt, right? But if I think like there's something wrong with me, or I'm a self-sabotager, or I'm weak-willed, or I'm whatever, fill in the blank, that is shame. So shame is a lot more personal, right? It's like personifying the sin, which the etymology of the word guilt actually means to sin. But with shame, it's like we take it personal, like we are wrong, we are bad, versus I did something wrong, right? So that's the distinguishing factor right there. Then when we come to blame, right, a lot of time it does show up in the form of self-blame, like blaming yourself, like how could I do this? What's wrong with you? Kind of holding yourself, like in punishing yourself, so to speak, right? But sometimes it's external too. Like maybe you're blaming your husband for bringing cookies in the house, or you're blaming your mom or your dad for teaching you poor habits, right? Or maybe you're blaming that cookie for being so gosh darn irresistible. Either way, blame, it's a losing game. And here's why. A lot of women think like, hey, I need to take responsibility for it. That's the distinction right there. The difference between taking responsibility and ownership. And I'm a full proponent of taking radical ownership and responsibility. But blame, it denotes shame. Like it denotes that you did something wrong. But what if there was no need to assign blame? What if you could just own it and take responsibility for it without blame shifting or focusing the blame on yourself, right? Because again, all we do when we blame ourselves, because that's the most common form of blame, is we put ourselves in this kind of shame prison, right? Comparisonitis, that's a big one, right? So comparing yourself to where you think you should be, to where you used to be, to other people, right? It all falls under that reel. And what do they say? Comparison is the thief of joy, right? And it really is. It causes us to suffer. It takes us away from who we want to be, and it focuses on what we don't have, what we don't like, what we think we should be doing more of. It's the opposite of a self-acceptance and self-love, right? But again, if you learn to practice comparisonitis, and it's part of your just kind of everyday self-talk, it's something that it doesn't go away on its own. You've got to address it, right? And so comparison, or comparisonitis, as I like to call it, really can show up, especially a lot nowadays in social media. Taking a look at other people's highlight reels. And, it's not very often that somebody posts on social media and is like, oh my gosh, I'm having the worst day ever. And I have really bad anxiety. And my husband and I got in a really bad fight. And I just binged a package of Oreos. No, most people, and don't get me wrong, there's some people that are, but most are showing up with this kind of perception-based, persona. And again, nothing wrong with this either. Just we have to see it for what it is, or be aware of what it is and what it isn't. And we share our highlight reels, and so, one of the things that is really important is that we keep a perspective on ourselves. But if we don't have that self-image ingrained, which is a lot of the work that I do with my clients, if we don't have an identity rooted in self-love and self-compassion and self-acceptance and self-endorsement and self-care and all the selves, we are going to be a victim, so to speak, to feeling like we are always comparing to somebody else. And if your self-image, if you kind of have a poor relationship with yourself or a negative self-image, that comparison is not going to look good in your mind, right? And so that is a part of the weight of the weight. And then, of course, perfectionism, right? And with perfectionism, it is this idea that you have to do everything right all the time, be perfect, speak perfectly, look perfectly, act perfectly, all these things. And I'm telling you, one of my mentors actually says that, perfectionism is actually the lowest standard. People kind of, use perfectionism as almost a badge of honor. I know I used to. I've had a very interesting relationship with perfectionism, but I used to think like, no, perfectionism is good. I am a perfectionist. And I used to say that a lot. And first of all, I realized that was putting me in a prison of like false expectations and kind of crazy expectations that I was never able to live up to, right? But anytime I, got off course or whatever, I would always call it a failure or not successful or whatever. And then a lot of times it would cause me to kind of say, screw it and give up, because if I couldn't be perfect, I didn't want to do it at all. But the other side of it is that for perfectionism, what can be tricky is it causes us to often miss out on our life and kind of sit on the sidelines, because it's if I can't be perfect at it, I don't want to do it. I don't want to be known for not doing something perfectly, right? And so I started to say a second ago, my mentor says it best, that perfectionism is actually the lowest standard because it is an unattainable thing, right? It's this fairy tale, non-achievable thing that once we get really real with it and, start giving ourselves permission to be our best. What if we gave ourselves permission to be our best, right? And I know it's a whole nother conversation on its own and it goes kind of beyond the scope of this conversation. But again, just kind of planting these seeds that, shame, blame, guilt, comparisonitis, perfectionism, that is the weight of the weight. It's bogging you down. It's weighing you down, and it doesn't have to be there. It's optional. Okay. There's a parable that I share in the book that I want to just share with you because it really explains this perfectly. Because one of the things we talked about yesterday is when you feel a certain way, when you think certain thoughts about yourself, it is not benign. As we saw in the Tale of Two Cookies, when you think things like shame, blame, guilt, comparisonitis, all those things, your nervous system actually creates that system response in that cascade. Gastrointestinal shuts down. you're producing cortisol, adrenaline, epinephrine, those stress hormones, right? Respiratory, musculoskeletal, endocrine, all of the system of systems that dictates your body just kind of shut down. And, if we are talking about fat loss, weight loss, all that stuff, it's not good for that either, right? And so one of the things that we really want to notice about this self-talk is, that it is not benign. Like, even though you can't see what it's doing, it is actually impacting your physiological health as well, right? But the thing I really want you to get is that it's happening either way. Like, whether you're feeding a really powerful self-image, or whether you are kind of contributing to more of a toxic, like self-deprecating, self-rejecting self-image, it's happening either way, ladies. And so part of it is we have to become aware of it and become conscious of it before we can shift it. Because again, whether you like it or not, or know it or not, it is happening. So the parable that I share in the book is the tale of two wolves. And you may have heard it before, but it really might hit home in this context. It goes a little something like this. One evening, a Cherokee elder told his grandson about a battle that goes on inside people. He said, "My son, the battle is between two wolves inside of us all. One is evil, anger, envy, jealousy, sorrow, regret, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, inferiority, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other is good, joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, generosity, truth, compassion, and faith." The grandson thought about it for a minute and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf wins?" And the old Cherokee replied, "The one that you feed." So really think about this. Which one are you feeding? As you're seeing in the Tale of Two Cookies, it's not benign, right? It's happening either way. It just becomes a matter of, do you become conscious of the voices of shame, blame, guilt, comparisonitis, self-rejection, self-deprecation, all of those things that are showing up in your self-talk and body talk? And do you stay a victim to momentum and a victim to your circumstances, or do you go influence it? And I mean that with so much love, but you have to make a choice. You have to say, no, I'm so sick of treating myself like dirt, right? I'm so sick of giving love and kindness to everyone else, but I don't give it to myself. Or maybe you have a hard time receiving that love and kindness from other people because you're not able to receive it for yourself. That shows up a lot too in the work that I do, right? So again, I mean it with love, but part of it is you've got to take radical ownership, not blame, right? Radical ownership of how you've been talking to yourself, because it's not only not benign, but it also doesn't go away on its own. It doesn't fix itself. Everything that we're talking about here in stressless eating, the disordered eating, and then the self-image and body image and self-talk that comes alongside of it, it really is like a cancer. It doesn't go away on its own. It doesn't heal itself. It actually gets worse if you don't heal it, right? So you've got to cut out the cancer, right? And oftentimes it's a hard pill to swallow, because it's like, wait a minute, I'm the one causing it. I'm the one creating it. But that's a beautiful thing, because it means you're also the solution, right? So yes, you're the problem. And I mean that with love, but you're also the solution. And there is a solution. You don't have to live like this, right? The other thing I'll say about it is this. I know a lot of women, and this is where I was for years. And that's another reason I share a lot of this. It's just like, gosh, I wish I knew what I know now then, right? But let's say you do go lose a bunch of weight, get to your ideal size, all that. If you've been being a hyper judgmental, self-critical, kind of mean girl to yourself the whole time, it doesn't just magically go away. I remember for me, there was a bunch of pivotal moments for me. This is back in the fitness industry. And I was very much in the trenches of everything that I'm helping women heal from now. I had a very disordered relationship with food, trying to out-exercise, my sugar addictions, and just trying to out-diet everything, right? Not to mention, I hadn't really healed my self-image and body image. I just went and lost a lot of weight, and you'd think, like, Leanne, you just lost a third of your body weight. Why don't you feel amazing, beautiful, powerful, confident? And I think I thought I did. Like, I think I did to a certain extent. But the real, the truth happened for me when I was contributing to Fitness RX magazine at the time. And my editor wanted to do a before and after story on me. About my weight loss. So she did the interview over the phone, and she happened to be, I was living in Orlando at the time, and she happened to be in Orlando for a conference, and she's like, "Hey, why don't I come to your studio and we'll do, I'll show you kind of like what I've put together, and we can just meet up in person." So we're there, and she's like, "Hey, while I'm here, can you give me some pictures of you, like before and after pictures or whatnot?" So I showed her, the before and after pictures that I was going to send her. And one was my most recent headshot. And she's like, okay, Leah. And I was literally wearing a turtleneck. I was super covered up, which nothing wrong with taking headshots in a turtleneck, right? But she said to me, she's like, hey, do you have a picture of you in a bikini or a sports bra or something like that? And my immediate reaction was oh, hell no, that will never happen. And so right away I realized wow, I still have some body image stuff. That's super interesting. And she was super awesome, super pro women, you know what I mean? Really about self-empowerment. And she's like, how about this? She's like, I'll hook you up with trainers. I'll hook you up with, hair, makeup, photographer, all that. What if you did a bikini photo shoot and you never have to show it to anybody if you don't want to, but just for you. So I was like, okay, that sounds pretty cool. So I got to work and lots of in the trenches of straight up diet mentality, lots of tilapia and very little, I guess technically it was enough food, but not a lot of food, very calorie restricted. I was doing 2-a-days at the gym. Again, I didn't know what I didn't know, but I was eye on the prize, right? And about a week before my photo shoot, she asked me if I could go out to Daytona Beach to represent the magazine and go cover, because the coaches that I was working with, they were in charge of coaching all of these fitness and figure professionals. And they were 6 weeks out from one of the biggest competitions in the world, the Arnold. And so she's like, can you go cover it? They're having a cheat meal on Friday, and then Saturday they're doing it a fitness boot camp. Can you go both nights and cover it? So it's sure. So I went Friday, everything was cool, met the gals, they were super sweet. The next day, the woman that was coaching me, the fitness coach, she's like, hey, bring your bikini when you come. I want to see it. And I was like, okay, great. And I had paid a lot of money for this bikini. It was the bikini for the infamous bikini photo shoot that I was doing. And I got there the next day and she, I'm holding this teeny little bikini in my hands. And she's like, cool, just go put it on and get in line and practice posing with the other girls. And these girls were 6 weeks out of the biggest competition in the world, super, super fit, lean, all the things. But I was trying to be all professional. I was like, yeah, sure, I got this. No worries, right? So I go to the bathroom, put my bikini on. I get back in line. I'm in the line with these girls. And again, these girls are super sweet. And they knew my story and they had all been super kind to me. But this gal's talking to me while I'm in line. And I just remember hot flashes coming over my body, and she's talking to me, and I just remember hearing wah, 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 wah. I was so zoned out and tuned out because I felt super hot, and I knew tears were about to come streaming down my face. I was about to start bawling. And so I grabbed all my stuff. I ran to the bathroom, which was in the back towards the back exit. And I was just bawling my eyes out. Right. And it was such a surreal experience because I remember looking in the mirror and I was like, Leanne, your arms are toned. And I'm like, Leanne, your stomach is flat. And Leanne, you look exactly how you've always wanted to look since you were a little girl. Why do you not feel it? And that is what that's the first time I experienced what I call now the face off between my fat head and my skinny head, where I was like, oh my gosh, everything physically has changed, but I still was seeing myself through fat goggles. I knew the self-image and body image didn't change. I didn't necessarily have the words to describe it like that at the time, but I just knew why do I still feel this way about myself? Why do I still feel so unworthy? Why do I not feel beautiful? All the things, right? Why do I still feel fat, right? So I grab my stuff. I run to the car. I call my editor. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. This is what just happened. And she was like, it's all good. And we can just use the footage from last night. And she was so understanding, thank God. But it was a very pivotal moment for me. And honestly, that is when I really just started just going at it. When it came to I was convinced, I realized I have some issues here that never got addressed, right? Or I have some habits that got instilled that are not good habits, that are not supportive of my health and my happiness. And I knew I needed to do a lot of work, right? And that's really when I started making the work on myself, kind of a full-time job. And, fast forward many, many moons later, and here we are. And I'm talking about how to create that for yourself in this book. right? But that's why I'm so, I talked a little bit yesterday about why I'm passionate and purposeful about the food side of things. And I know that the world's throwing more diets at the emotional struggles that we're facing. But also it's so personal to me. I lived it. And everything that I talk about in the book, really it's never me coming from some high mountain of like, oh, that was so, 2008, been there, done that. It's like, no, I live these principles every single day and I will need these philosophies for the rest of my life. But like, they're the kind of thing that just gets easier the more you practice it, and it becomes who you are more and more the more that you practice it. And that's why I'm so passionate and purposeful about just putting it out there. Okay. So that is chapter 2, Stressless Eating. If you want your free copy, go to stresslesseatingbook.com. Check out stresslesseatingscore.com to fill out the free scorecard. Find out where you rate or where you kind of fall right now. And it's an ever-changing thing with those 8 power mindsets. And we will be back tomorrow for chapter 3 of the book. Thanks for tuning in for the Stressless Eating Virtual Book Club here live for our Stressless Eating podcast. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If you like what you heard and you're interested in breaking out of your own food, body, and diet prison, here's what I want you to do next. Head on over to stresslesseating.com. That's stresslesseating.com. And sign up to watch the Stressless Eating webinar, where I'll walk you through the exact 5-step game plan my female clients use to conquer emotional eating, self-sabotage, and finally heal themselves from the restrictive all-or-nothing diet mentality for good. But without obsessing or spending years in therapy to address it. I've laid it all out there for you in 5 easy steps. Remember, healing your relationship with food and your body does not happen by itself. You need expert guidance to make it happen, and we've helped clients all over the world take back their power from the food and find true and lasting freedom while enjoying life and warm chocolate chip cookies along the way. To see if we can help you do the same, head on over to stresslesseating.com. I'm Leanne Ellington, and I'll see you next time.